Coming at you live from outside of space and time. I'm Naeem. Welcome to the feedback loop. This is going to be a bit of a restream. I tried to do a stream the other day and the audio was just atrocious. I had some of my settings messed up, so that was my fault. So I'm actually going to talk about some of those things again here because I deleted that stream because it was just unbearable. What's up, Ben Barrera? How you doing, man? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a couple things today. Not many people caught the last one, and even if they did, the audio was horrible. So if you are watching now, and if there is a problem with the audio, please let me know. It was cutting off some of my words. I had a noise, a audio clip on to try and remove background noise, but it was actually removing my voice because, so just let me know if you can, if everything's smooth, and, I'll get to it. At Crypto Viewing, we, a couple months back, we did a project on Skinwalker Ranch. There's a TV show talking all about that place. Interesting location. That remote viewing, we worked blind targets, myself, Dennis Nappy II, Dick Algier, Edward Reardon. We worked a UFO sighting that occurred at Skinwalker Ranch, which was aired, I think, in season 3 of the TV series. We worked that as a blind target, and we did a documentary on it, which includes also work done on the whiteboard. We did whiteboard work as well. That documentary was behind a paywall on the Crypto Viewing private site, but now it is available online. So I will put that in the description. I'll probably pin that in the description somewhere, so people can watch that if they want. So today I'm going to be talking about virtual time, real time, the readiness potential, and the lag of consciousness. These are a couple different ideas and concepts, phenomena that are kind of interrelated and are probably should be, considered or pondered. And they're just interesting things that tie into the whole idea of non-local perception, remote viewing in general. So one of the things I was talking about last time was virtual time, living in real time. If you ever played an online video game, like an online multiplayer game, and have ever experienced a lag in the game, it kind of ruins the illusion that you have when you're playing an online game, because it's the illusion is that you're all playing together, kind of like in the same time frame, but really there's obviously differences in the actual timings of what everyone's doing. It all has to kind of be synced together and rendered in a virtual time. And when there's lag and connection issues in the system, that's when you experience a lag in the gameplay, and that kind of ruins that illusion. So there's a similar kind of thing in consciousness. So people, the whole idea of living in the now, living in the moment. I understand the concept behind that. You know what I mean? To live in the now and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the actuality of information processing, like how do we actually create reality? How are our perceptions formed? When it comes to that, we don't live in the moment or anything like that. We don't really even live in the present. We actually we lag behind whatever you want to call reality. You know what I mean? Whatever you think is out there that we perceive, um, we lag behind it. So it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but I'll kind of try to explain in some of the things from these books here. One of them, this one's really interesting, and I recommend this. This is a good read. It's kind of a thick one, but it goes into a lot of things. And this is a science book. This is a science writer. Um, this is not a ESP book. This is not about psychic perception or anything like that. This is it's called The User Illusion by Tor Nori Tranders, Cutting Consciousness Down to Size. And it kind of sounds like a negative title, because cutting consciousness down to size, like what does that mean? Consciousness is, we think of the word consciousness, especially in these days, the way it's used. It's kind of like a generalized term for. It's a very fluffy term, you know what I mean? Consciousness, like people say, "Oh, consciousness is what creates our reality," and stuff like that. And I understand what they mean when they say that, but that's why this title, "Cutting Consciousness Down to Size," kind of sounds like negative depending on where you're looking at it from. But I think really what he's highlighting in here is that what we experience as our conscious perceptions, day-to-day life, reality, our capacity, our conscious capacity, it's overblown. I mean, we give it more credit than what it should get, because our subconscious or these other processes are actually doing a lot more of the work behind the scenes. So that's really what he's kind of pointing out in this book, Cutting Consciousness Down to Size. So let me go to this part here, and this is called the half-second delay. And this has something to do, this is tied to something called the readiness potential. And it's kind of trippy, but let me just read about this. So they were measuring EEGs, and they wanted to find out, what kind of activity happens when someone's going to perform a free will action. You know what I mean? So if I'm going to flex my finger or move my hand, they were trying to measure the brain waves at the same time and trying to find out, what are the correlations between that? What kind of activity happens? So they had their subjects repeat simple actions like flexing their finger again and again, and they added up the EEG measurements. And basically what they found was there's a wave of potential, there's a wave of excitement that happens before the action occurs. So before someone actually decided to move their finger or flex it, the brain wave activity was already being excited before that happened. So they found that what they called the readiness potential, the average was actually 0.8 seconds, but even up to 1.5 seconds, sometimes before someone was performing what they perceived to be a free will action, the brain wave activity, something was happening, sometimes up to a second and a half before they even consciously conceived of performing this act. So that was one finding. The readiness potential was one thing, but then later on, someone came and kind of went back to this experiment and added in another measurement. So basically, they wanted to know when someone was going to flex their finger. Not presentiment. This is not really a size study. This is basically what they were measuring the brain activity. They wanted to know how long does it take, or what kind of things are going on when someone performs any basic free will action, like just like flexing your finger or moving your hand. what kind of brainwave activity happens. And they basically found out that before someone flexes their finger or does a simple action, up to a second, half a second or a second and a half before they even choose to do that, there's some kind of excitation that happens in the brainwaves. So later on, someone came along and they wanted to know, when did the person consciously choose to do the action? They wanted to add that measurement into it. So they were measuring the actual electric activity in the hand, so they could actually measure when the person actually flexed their finger. They were measuring the brainwave, so they know what activity was happening, and they added in the person's actually going to indicate through a certain method when their actual subjective perception of when they chose to flex their finger. So now you have these 3 time points kind of plotted out. And the experiments were carried out in July 1979. And what they found out was that this readiness potential starts 0.55 seconds before an act. And then consciousness, what we would deem as like consciousness, the person actually saying, like choosing, oh, I'm going to flex my finger now, that actually started at 0.2 seconds before the act. The conscious decision thus takes place 0.35 seconds after the readiness potential commences. That is, 0.35 seconds passes between brain startup and the conscious experience of making a decision. If we round the figures out, which is reasonable when they arise from a concrete experiment, the conclusion is that the consciousness, the consciousness of the will to carry out an act decided on by ourselves occurs almost half a second after the brain has started carrying out the decision. Right? So this is, what this reminds me of, this kind of concept is like almost like kind of like the ideogram thing. It's like there's some kind of activity that's sparking up, and then you're going to end up acting, and it's going to execute itself. That's kind of a more extrapolated form of it, I think. But this is even on the most basic level. This is like before you even choose to flex your finger, it's already been downloaded into your brain or something. Your brain's already, moving on it. So it's like we're not, this is the idea of the lag. We're not living, our concepts of time are skewed. Our perception of time is skewed. And that's probably why things like remote viewing, which seem impossible, are possible. It's because we don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what time is really. But okay, so let me get back to this. The desire to carry out an action becomes a conscious sensation long after the brain has started initiating it, but consciousness does occur before the action is performed. The brain evidently decides to initiate, or in the least prepare to initiate the act at a time before there is any reportable subjective awareness that such a decision has taken place. Libet and his colleagues write in the reporting on their findings. It was Benjamin Libet was the guy who did these, involved in these studies here. It is concluded that cerebral initiation, even of a spontaneous voluntary act of the kind studied here, can and usually does begin unconsciously. So the idea that we're controlling ourselves and there's the conscious mind is some kind of control seat, and it's making all these decisions on its own. I mean, to a certain level, yeah, but even those, all the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, I mean, the subconscious is the unconscious or the subconscious, whatever you want to call it, is totally capable of serving those things up for you to do, right? We're not aware of how deep it goes or how wide its information bandwidth is. So, but things like this kind of give us a little bit of insight into it. And these guys, like I said, these guys aren't ESP guys. They're just straightforward science guys. So to them, they're just kind of looking at that saying, wow, how is that possible? The readiness potential is seen a second before the act. In simpler acts, the readiness potential appears 0. 0.5 seconds before the act at a time of negative 0.5 seconds, but the conscious decision to perform an act only appears at negative 0.2 seconds. Thus, more than 0.3 seconds passes before consciousness discovers that the brain is already implementing the consciously chosen act. So, this, they keep saying the brain is choosing, the brain is choosing. I don't know if the brain is choosing anything, but there's some kind of activity that happens, and then the conscious awareness has to like recognize or pick that up, and then it's kind of grabbing it, and it thinks it's its own idea. It thinks it's its own action, and that's like what happens in remote viewing, right? These things come to you, and if you don't know what you're doing, it can be very confusing. If it's not organized and you don't know how to kind of surf the psychic signal, it can be confusing, right? And of course, doing psi type non-local perception using remote viewing is more through a scientific lens, whereas I'm sure you can imagine if someone had spontaneous experiences of psi, or had an intuitive way where they intellectualized it and gained control over it, they could interpret that in so many ways, right? we talk about it in terms of our subconscious and accessing information, but it could be interpreted in so many other ways, talking to gods, or you know what I mean, spirit guides. There's different ways you can interpret the experience. So yeah, that's the readiness potential, the half-second delay. So you actually not only, what we think of as real time, what you think of as like, I'm choosing to do this now, even that is preceded by activity that we're not aware of. And it's hard for people to accept that, right? Because the intellect part, the conscious part, doesn't want to accept that it has these limits, right? It doesn't want to accept that. So there's that. And then we'll go to this book, Consciousness and the Brain, Deciphering How the Brain Codes Our Thoughts, Stanislas Dehaene. And I've quoted some stuff from here in presentations I've done before. It's a good book. Also not a ESP book. I don't think these guys don't believe in that kind of crazy stuff. Let's see here. Yeah, I think we all have spontaneous experiences where we know things, and especially probably in the dream state. That's probably where it happens mostly for people. And for the most part, we just can't don't know how, we don't accept the information for what it is. Usually, like most people, when they have a dream, they just think of it as kind of like random things. Whereas, when I have a dream, I think of it, when I think of the dream and I remember it, I'm trying to think like, where was I? Was that a real place? Is that a place I know? Is there people I know? Like, was it a real thing? Was it related to real life? Those are the kinds of things that's how I look at my dreams, because I know that my dreams tell me, communicate things. If you don't think your dreams communicate things, then you're not, people won't look in there for anything. But I'm going to read a little bit from here, page 125 of Consciousness and the Brain. And it says, consciousness lags behind the world. An important consequence of these observations is that our consciousness of unexpected events lags considerably behind the real world. Now, their idea of the real world is probably not what it is either, but let's continue for the sake of learning here. Not only do we consciously perceive only a very small proportion of the sensory signals that bombard us, but when we do, it is with a time lag of at least 1/3 of a second. In this respect, our brain is like an astronomer who watches for supernovae. Because the speed of light is finite, the news from distant stars takes millions of years to reach us. Likewise, because our brain accumulates evidence at a sluggish speed, the information that we attribute to the conscious present is outdated by at least 1/3 of a second. I understand the metaphor. Um, the duration the duration of this blind period may even exceed half a second when the input is so faint that it calls for a slow accumulation of evidence before crossing the threshold for conscious perception. And and this is actually a kind of metaphor that I've been thinking of using. He talks about it with astronomy here, but I think in terms of photography in general. He says this is analogous to the astronomer's long exposure shooting, which lets the light in from faint stars to accumulate on a sensitive photographic plate. Right. So it's like there's a certain exposure, a time of exposure that like certain signals have to reach a certain strength before they kind of like push their way into our awareness. So something could be happening, so to speak, and it's not going to happen for you until the signals kind of burst through a certain threshold, and then you have a perception of it. Even with light, right? Like your eye is only sensitive to certain kinds of light and certain intensities and luminosities of light. So there could be a very, very dim light that your eye can't perceive, or frequencies of light like infrared and stuff. Other animals, can see those. There is types of light there. It's not entering your awareness. It doesn't break the threshold. Just as we saw, consciousness can be delayed even further when the mind is occupied elsewhere. This is why you should not use your cell phone while driving. Even in a seemingly reflex response, such as hitting the brakes when you see the taillights of a car in front of you, slows down when your conscious mind is distracted. So, that's the same idea of, in your computer running background tasks. Obviously, you would close all the background applications if you want your computer to run at optimal conditions. A similar thing happens in our awareness when you're distracted, when you have too many inputs. You lag behind even more. Your reaction time, like they call it, is decreased. And that's something you got to take into account when it comes to remote viewing. It's like the whole reason you remain blind is because you don't want distractions. You don't want too many inputs. You don't want too many things coming in at you at once. The idea is to kind of have it cleared out so that the mechanisms that we call unconscious, like your reflexes, those kind of things get to kick in. Like the ideogram is like one of those unconscious reflexes, right? It's like a jerk reaction that happens. When our brain's anticipation mechanisms fail, do we become acutely aware of the long delay that our consciousness imposes? If you accidentally drop a glass of milk, you experience this phenomenon firsthand. For a split second, you become acutely aware that your consciousness gropes hopelessly behind the event, and you can only lament in your own slowness, right? How many people have had that happen, right? Usually when I knock something over or something like that, somehow, I unconsciously react and catch it and stop it from falling. And it usually is like very surprising even to me. It's like, wow, how did I do that, right? And then when it happens the other way, when you knock something over and there's no way you're going to stop this thing from happening. It's too late. It's like it's happening in slow motion in front of you and there's nothing you can do. So that's the difference. Those are one is your conscious self trying to handle a situation, and the other is that unconscious reflex. It has no problem handling this situation, whereas we struggle if you try and consciously do that. Um, so that's what I'm talking about virtual time, right? Lagging. We don't live in a physical reality the way that the way that we're taught. Okay. I'm not saying there's physicality is not important or anything like that. It is important. That's how we process information into a physical form. Some people call it holographic, or the point is information. The way we perceive information is through the body, right? So we are, we have spiritual aspects, we have non-physical aspects that are important as well, and it's integrated into the body. And it's like the body is where the processing happens. It's like the computer, so to speak. And consciousness would be more like the software. So what is outside of us, you can't get around consciousness. You know what I mean? You're not going to get around consciousness. So that's the problem with science, right? Science can only go so far, right? They call consciousness the hard problem because they can't. How are they gonna? They have no way of getting by that because they have to use their consciousness to do the studies, right? So maybe that's why they want to use computers so much. But let me know what you guys think about these kind of things. I mean, free will seems to be, we like to think of free will as evident and obvious, but things like the readiness potential, I mean, I'm not saying it dictates our actions, but maybe our perception of time is skewed. You know what I mean? In some way, it's just these things are kind of hard to fathom. Like if that would mean everything I'm talking right now. I've been talking for 30 minutes, and my experience is that I'm choosing and getting to select the flow of the conversation and things like that. But there could be activity going on that actually preceded my choices. So it's interesting to think about. What kind of people do you think are capable of doing remote viewing? Well, generally speaking, I think every human being, everyone in the species has the same abilities. So if you're a human being, you're equal in potential ability as anyone else. We all have the innate abilities built in. So anyone could do it. It's just whose belief systems, whose reality boxes, whose aligned with the idea of remote viewing and would actually put in the time and effort to develop it and become good at it. So those are two completely different things. Who's going to find remote viewing significant and important enough to actually do it, probably for no financial gain? You know what I mean? So it's a tricky question. You know what I mean? Potentially anyone could be good at remote viewing because we're all already processing information. So even your regular, what we call normal life, like you watching this monitor, watching me on the screen right now, you are remotely perceiving something. It's separate from your body, and you're using the same processing faculties to take in that information and crunch it and create a perception. So the remote viewing information that comes in is really, it comes in through a separate input. That's all. It's going to get processed the same way. So you're already remote viewing. Everyone's already remote viewing. It's just, can you remote view something that's really, really far away from you, or hidden in time or whatever like that. Um, yeah, we're everyone has the ability, but it does take a lot of time and practice, and it does take a certain amount of intellectual power as well. You know what I mean? Um, there's a lot of naturally talented intuitives and psychics that have great ability and they produce some amazing results, but they maybe sometimes they may not even understand it as much as they could, because their interpretation of it is different, and that's for them. You know what I mean? um like I said, there's so many ways to interpret this information. We live in a time where we know more about information transfer and processing, right? Because we built more technology now, so we can kind of fathom these things. The technology we have now would have been, excuse me, would have been considered like magic or just a couple hundred years ago, right? So, um, consciousness is right now seems like magic to people that are only into materialism, right? It's like, no, you're lying. It's a hoax. You're a charlatan. It's impossible. So it seems like magic right now, but it's like a kind of technology that in the future will, it'll, if it's allowed to flourish, will surpass it'll surpass all the stuff we're using, even the technology we're using right now for me to broadcast right now. What are your thoughts regarding your consciousness reaching out visually to meet the object you are looking at? For example, a street sign or person 100 feet away. Yeah, well, the original definition for sense, I don't know it word for word right now off the top of my head, but the root of it goes back to like reaching out, um, and it's that idea of I actually used to do I do that all the time, even before I got into remote viewing. It's kind of just a thing I just did, I guess, just as a curious child or person. Like I look at things at a distance, and I would try and move my awareness over there and feel what it's like if I was there. You know what I mean? Like if I'm looking at a building far away or I'm looking at something down the street, you know, how would it feel if I was there? Can I feel the surfaces? Can I, interact? How does it feel to be there? I would do those kind of things all the time. And if you do those things, you realize that, yeah, you can feel what's over there. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's hard to separate the signal from the noise when you do it that way. But you get into things like remote viewing, that's when you can, verify that, yes, okay, that's the real deal. But staying, yes, exactly. Anthony C. Clark, Arthur C. Clarke, yeah. Technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Exactly. Um, but yeah, things like that can help you get more comfortable with your awareness being more expanded. In my recent stream, I was talking about the psychological factors of, you know, how is this possible? That kind of stops a lot of people from even trying it in the first place, right? There, a lot of people are too caught up with trying to reason with themselves intellectually how it's even possible, so they wouldn't even try it. Do you get what I mean? I'm more of a let's see if it's real kind of guy. That's what I am. I'm not, I love reading. I read a lot of stuff. I probably read more books than a lot of people, but when it comes down to it, those are just books, right? I want to know. I want to experience it. Experience is the real teacher. Life is the real teacher. So You could, you can remote view front loaded. It's just, it's not going to be remote viewing, right? In the scientific sense. Um, when you work operationally, there's going to be a lot of times where you are front loaded to a certain degree. So for me, I've been doing remote viewing for a while, and I think I'm pretty good at certain aspects of it, and one of them is I'm not I'm not as much influenced by, if I know the target is a structure or a person or something like that, it's not going to ruin my session, right? Like those kinds of low level front loading, um, like the target is a person. It's like, okay, there's billions of people. That's not really front loading. It's a form of front loading, but not really. Um, for me, that's not going to ruin my session. It's just going to let me get down to business, and I won't waste time describing all the other things, right? So when you start working operationally, there's going to be times where you're front loaded, right? If the police need you to find someone, they're not going to, they're not going to waste time. They don't want to know anything else. They want to know where the person is, probably. That's it. So they're not going to care about all the other things that you have to say. So don't waste your time. So that when it comes to operational viewing, it's not as much about, oh, we're trying to prove this is remote viewing, right? Because that's what most of the scientific studies are about. Or when most people start looking into remote viewing, all they care about is what were the conditions about it. But when it comes to operational remote viewing, people eventually come to know, like, is this person legit? Are they real? And then they want the results, right? They want the information. And so whether you probably have project managers that handle all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can work. I wouldn't advise doing it all the time, but let's say you wanted to develop your ability to remote view people, then yeah, I would work targets that are people. Knowing they're people. So have someone give me a target, knowing it's a person, and work it. There's enough variation in people that I'm not going to go use that as my greatest remote viewing hit or something if I get it right. But it's about developing different aspects of your viewing, right? The more grounded you are, the easier remote viewing is. I don't know. I don't know if it's the more grounded you are. Maybe it's so many different things, but curiosity is a part of it. Are you actually curious? Do you really want to know things? You know what I mean? This curiosity killed the cat, right? Because a cat hears the noise or it sees something move, and then it actually goes and investigates it, right? That's how the mind of a cat is. Like, dogs aren't exactly like that. Other animals aren't always like that. Um, so it's like, are you curious enough to get this impression and be like, ooh, what was that? You know what I mean? And in a way, yes, I would say yes, being grounded probably could make you better, because you're not so caught up in being psychic or being right or wrong, right? A lot of people want to get good at remote viewing so they can kind of have a stellar result and be like, wow, look at what I did. I'm psychic. Look at what I did. Um, so being more grounded could help in that sense, because it's not about the result like that. It's more about the experience of getting to know how the process works more. You know what I mean? I've had times where I've seen the target and drew it exactly, and those are great moments. But there's still more to. I'm still garbage, and in my mind, I'm still not good enough yet. We still room for improvement. Got to get it to the point where that happens maybe more often. You can start drawing the target exactly every time, or almost every time. Then yeah, then we're going somewhere. Yeah, remote viewing isn't for people that aren't grounded in some kind of, I don't want to say grounded in reality, because everyone's reality is different, and the world we live in is just insane. So don't ground yourself there. But you got to have a certain um, level of maybe detachment from remote viewing to be good at it. Because if you're too caught up in being right, like just like I was saying before, if you're too caught up with being right or being perfect or being some kind of prophet or then you're going to lose you're opening yourself up to becoming mentally unstable. It does make some people mentally unstable because you could be good at it. You could be good at remote viewing and you could see some real things. And then once you see those things happen or you see the results, then you start actually realizing, like, wow, reality is not what they taught me, right? Reality is not what everyone else thinks it is. You start to actually realize that. And that can be very destabilizing. You know what I mean? It's not for everyone. Um, Most people, if I told them, hey, we look at the future every month and we get some awesome hits and we've been doing it for years, that's just nonsense to them, complete nonsense to them. So it's not for everybody, but it is for certain people. If you're watching this, you're a certain type of person that is interested in this, and you're a niche. You're in a niche, right? Um, there's lots of other things that people think are important right now in the world that they're spending their time on. It's been 40 minutes. Hopefully, this has been educational and thought provoking in some way so far. My website is thefeedbackloop.info. I work over at Crypto Viewing. When it comes to remote viewing, I work with a team of remote viewers at Crypto Viewing, where we look at cryptocurrencies, financial markets. Then we also do future events, like world events, like what are going to be the upcoming major news events of the upcoming month. And we also look at like woo-woo targets. Like I was saying, we did a project on Skinwalker Ranch, which is available now. It's out. So yeah, check us out over at Crypto Viewing if you would like to get more, get more remote viewing type content from serious remote viewers. And there's some opportunities to learn remote viewing too there as well. If you'd like to support the channel, you can donate through PayPal or cryptocurrencies. My information's there on the screen. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think about that. Kind of just done my spiel for now. That was what I wanted to talk about, those couple things, that the lag of consciousness, the readiness potential, real time, virtual time. So, when you're living in real time, if we're beings who live in real time, right? If that's our nature, then we most likely, hint, hint, we do have a mechanism that allows us to see what happens next or get insight on what comes next. So it's a different way of seeing things, right? Living in real time, you're processing information in real time. Yeah, each person's doing that. And then we're kind of stitched together in some kind of virtual time. What do you think is going on at Skinwalker? Hard to say. From my data and the data we collected over at Crypto Viewing, it seems like there's probably some kind of interdimensional type thing going on there, some kind of visitors or something. Some interaction going there. Maybe, I had the perception that there's something underground there maybe like a base or something underneath where some of these craft come out of. Let me see if I can find that link to the. Is there a base under it? I've never been there, so I don't know. But my perception through remote viewing is that I perceive that there's some kind of opening or opening there that probably leads underground. That doesn't mean it is there, but maybe people could go there and see and find out. I'm gonna try and get the link to our full project of the Skinwalker Ranch documentary so that you guys could watch it if you want, because it's here I got the link. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. Did that work? Yeah. So that's the link to the remote viewing the Skinwalker Ranch project that we did over at Crypto Viewing, and I'll actually play the. I guess I'll run the intro or a little bit of it here, maybe for the next 10 minutes or something. And if you guys want to continue watching it, you could hop over to the link and finish watching it or something. So yeah, I'll let this run.
Hi, I'm Das Smith and I want to take you through the setup of this project. As a remote viewer, we all have these targets we want to work, but because we work totally blind to the targets, we can't pick our own targets. So over the last 3 years, I've compiled a list of 86 and growing targets that I've always wanted to see work, or I've always wanted to work on myself. So I approached the CV team to do these projects where I would swap roles with Dennis, and Dennis would become a remote viewer for a day and work on the project, and I would be the project manager. Now, the target we chose is completely blind. The remote viewers had no information whatsoever what this target was about, and all I did was I gave them the code numbers that you know for this target. They then worked on paper, and after they worked on paper to a certain degree, I gave them an email that said, okay, you have enough data now, please take your best data to whiteboard and show us what you got.
The Skinwalker Ranch is an area in eastern Utah known as a hotbed of paranormal activity, including UFO sightings, mysterious orbs of light, cattle mutilations, and the appearance of a bizarre creature with glowing eyes. The property is the subject of a popular History Channel show titled The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. In one well-publicised incident, surveillance cameras capture video evidence of what appears to be a UFO. We tasked this sighting as a blind target to the remote viewers, and they were given only a randomly generated series of numbers and letters. Was there really something in the sky above the ranch? Was it a physical object? What was it? Without seeing the video, with no knowledge of the target, and under completely blind protocol, this is what the remote viewers perceived.
I get a shape here that looks like a UFO type shape. It's my second capture. Third visual ideogram. Again, I'm seeing this shape curved. There might be something else going on there. That's my third capture. Non-surface structure. Go on to S2 here. Two 4031121. Visual recall. Shape here. Sounds. Whirring. Temperature. It's warm. Hot. Okay, I see a person. Life form. Sounds. Like talking. Like hair gel. Someone who would put gel in their hair.
Okay, here's the target ID 0202-MW01. That's an interesting target ID. You can feel that that's a good one. Okay, here we go. My first visual on this one is actually quite stark and powerful to me. It's sky. It's in the sky, and I would need to draw white and clouds, but it's a vast expanse. And there's a cloud here. But inside of it, almost as if I had see through the clouds or X-ray vision, there's this point, a small thing in the distance, probably disc-shaped.
All right, y'all. Yeah, the link's in the chat if you want to watch the rest of that full presentation there. Hopefully this was an interesting stream. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Naeem. Peace and love, y'all. Thanks for watching.